Consequently, the jealous despot sent his murderers to Bethlehem to butcher an estimated 20 unweaned male infants living there, but they missed the one they were after. Just in time, Jesus was hustled out of Bethlehem and taken to Egypt until Herod was dead. Jesus had come to demonstrate God's love for mankind. He suffered our sorrows, enabling him to understand all that we go through. Jesus also predicted his own sacrificial death for mankind. He was publicly announced as the Lamb of God who would die as a sacrifice for mankind, going as a lamb to the slaughter. Now on the star maps there appears a ram, popularly known as Aries. In various languages he is called the Lamb sent forth, the sheep gentle and merciful, the altar, the sacrifice of righteousness, the Lamb, the branch. And the names of principal stars in Aries mean the wounded, the bruised, the slain. I tell you, friends, Jesus' death was no accident. It was prophesied, it was planned for, even to the very day and year. Of course, evil men put him on a cross, but Jesus gave himself willingly into their hands to do it. He was to die to pay the penalty for our wrongs, and everyone who would choose to accept his death on their behalf could ultimately be freed from everlasting death. That was the purpose of his sacrifice. The crucifixion occurred on the 14th day of the Jewish month Nisan, which was the time of the full moon. Jesus Christ was nailed to the cross. The nails pierced his hands and feet. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. The sun climbed high into the sky, and by midday it was overhead. Suddenly the sun went black. The darkness continued for 3 hours. Could this have been a natural eclipse? Oh, indeed no. You see, it was the time of the full moon, and the moon could never eclipse the sun at that time because it was in the opposite side of the sky. On the day of Jesus' death in March-April AD 31, the sun was in the constellation Aries. At midday, Aries, the sign of the dying ram or lamb, stood right over the cross, right over Jerusalem. Then the sun was blacked out. At night, when the sun doesn't shine, we can see the stars. I don't know whether the stars became visible that day, but if they did, one might have seen 2 stars standing very close to the darkened sun. You see, at the very hour of the crucifixion, the sun stood at the very spot in Aries marked by the 2 stars, El Nath, which means the pierced, the wounded or slain, and Al Sheraton, which means the bruised or wounded. The Old Testament prophets said he would be pierced, wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. And now overhead stood those stars which were associated with the death of the promised one. When the Messiah was born, the sun was in the Virgin. And now when the Messiah died as God's Lamb, the sun was in Aries, the sign of the Lamb. But not just a lamb who was wounded and pierced on the star map. Who could have arranged that to have been overhead at the right time? Who? I suggest but the Creator himself. Now Satan had charged that God was a tyrant who did not care about his subjects, and that he, Satan, could set up a better government. But when the watching universe saw the centuries of hatred, heartache and death upon planet Earth, they began to understand. And when they saw God come to the rescue of man and saw Satan instigate the crucifixion of his own Creator, inflicting on him the most shameful, the most agonizing of deaths, could there be any longer any doubt? The cross was both the ultimate evidence of his malicious hatred and of the Creator's great love for man. No longer can there be any doubt as to who is responsible for this planet's tears, and who it is that really does care. The prophet writes, "And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation, and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night." No longer would Satan be allowed entrance to the heavenly gates to represent and accuse people on planet Earth. When Jesus died, Satan thought he had him. But 3 days later, Jesus suddenly burst from the tomb. Make no mistake, my friends, Jesus rose from the dead. That's world history and not fiction. There is evidence, reasonable evidence, that would pass the closest scrutiny in a law court. As a matter of fact, in my book, Ark of the Covenant, there are 5 chapters of indisputable evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. If you want evidence, if you want to study it, make sure you study the evidence in this book. Death could not hold him because he had never done wrong. And soon after this, Jesus ascended back to heaven. From now on, Jesus, having overcome Satan, would be the one to represent us. And if any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous. This is the constellation known as Ophiuchus. We see here this constellation on the old star maps. We see a great serpent in all its giant proportions, the serpent's reaching after the heavenly crown, and the strong man, Ophiuchus, is wrestling with him for the crown. As the serpent reaches for the crown, he's held tight by Ophiuchus, the serpent holder. His Egyptian name means the chief who shall come. He is also called the Desired One. He is also said to be bruised. And not only that, he's called the Healer and the Universal Remedy. You notice the scorpion raises its tail to strike his heel. Symbolically, the scorpion and the serpent are the same enemy. With one foot lifted from the serpent's tail as stung and hurt, he is in the act of crushing the serpent's head with the other. You remember that world's oldest prophecy that we saw earlier concerning the coming seed of the woman? The prophecy said, "He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." Now the meanings of some star names in this constellation are the serpent held, treading underfoot, bruised, the wounding, contending. In Arabic and Syriac, Scorpio's name means wounding, conflict, war. In Coptic it means attack of the enemy. The principal star in this group is Antares, which means wounding. This star shines ominously with a deep red light. The star Al-Akrib means wounding him that cometh. The star Lesath in the sting of the scorpion means the perverse. You see, it is a battle for dominion. The dominion that was stolen from our first parents and usurped by Satan, but is now to be regained for mankind by the coming deliverer. One of serpent's stars has a name meaning the accursed.